everyone just through some brief introductions. We have some folks here in one of our conference rooms, so I'll go through everyone who's in the room here, and then I will call on folks who are online. And just as the order they appear on my screen, so I'll go ahead and start. I'm Hannah Oden, I'm a planning coordinator at PAG.
I'm Maria Echeverri. I'm with Kimley Horn. I'm the project manager for this project.
Paige Helfenstein with Kimley Horn, marketing and public involvement.
Joseph Curry, Kimley Horn, public involvement.
Preston McLaughlin, transportation mobility manager here at PAG RTA.
I'm Dr. Famana Jeremiah, and I'm the transportation planning coordinator at PAG RTA.
Perfect. All right, and I'm just going to read the names as they appear on my screen online. So we're going to go to Jeanette.
Good morning. This is Jeanette Duran, Transportation Planning Director at PAG.
It's Jeanette and Lisa Schaefer.
Hi, Lisa Schaefer, Town and Marana Neighborhood Community and Neighborhood Services Director.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. And then Samuel Paz.
Good morning, Samuel Paz, transportation planner with Pima County DOT.
Thank you. And then Monica.
Hi, Monica Landgrave, lead planner with the City of Tucson. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. Amy Ramsey.
Hi, I'm Amy Ramsey. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works for the town of O'Malley.
Thank you, Amy. Brian Cow.
Hi, everybody. Brian Cow, transportation planner at Kimley Horn.
Brian and Davida.
Hi, Davida Mueller. I'm Director of Service Planning at Suntran.
Thanks, Davida. Dustin.
Hello, Dustin Fitzpatrick, Environmental Planning Administrator at PAG.
Thanks, Dustin. And Gal Kramer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gal Kramer. I work as a planner at VIA, working with Kimley Horn. I'm the lead on the VIA side.
Thanks, Gal. Let's see. Luba.
Hi, Luba Guzet, also with VIA, supporting Kimley Horn.
Thanks, Luba. Let's see. Yes. Oh, Jonathan.
Hi, Jonathan Crow, Senior Planner with Pima County DOT.
Thanks, Jonathan. And Josue.
Hey everybody, good morning. Josue Licea, City of South Tucson.
Thanks, Josue. And we also have our IT, tech admin support staff here keeping us going. So it's Bree, Don, Jesse, and I believe Issa as well. So we're going to make sure things run smoothly today. Was there anyone that I forgot? Or the list was kind of jumping around. So if there's anyone I forgot, feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, right. This is Jeff Robert. I'm the regional planner with the ADOT Multimodal Planning Division.
Oh, thanks, Jennifer. Welcome. Sorry I missed you.
Hi, I'm Sean Megan, Assistant General Manager at Sunvan.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Anyone else that I missed? All right, so we can go on to the next agenda item, which is our in-kind form. So I'm just going to read this language here. So regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. So if you're paid with federal dollars, please let us know now. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. Okay. With that, we can move on to the next agenda item. So we'll turn it over to Mariate.
Thank you, Hannah. And thank you everybody for being here today. It seems that we met very recently, but because we have to keep this going, we really need to kind of bring the latest kind of changes and simulations to you so we can, make sure that we are working on the things that work and that are important for you. So we have a couple of things today that we're going to talk about. We are going to touch briefly on the ongoing public involvement that is happening this week. And then we will be talking about the service opportunity areas and the simulations. And I have all my technical staff today, and they are going to be giving you the details of these topics. And we are going to have a discussion at the end. But if you have kind of a question that is very specific, I think it's good if you just raise your hand and we can talk about it. Just to make sure that we address those questions as we go. And Joe, if you want to begin with the public involvement.
Yeah, next slide, please. So this project is very involved on the public involvement and outreach side. We really want to hear from the riders and the people who are riding the buses for a variety of reasons, really what they are experiencing, what kind of gaps they feel, where are the enhancements needed, really just kind of the overall assessment from the riders' perspective. So back in October, we did our first round of public. I'm sorry.
Riders and residents. Yeah, the community in
general. And the community in
Yeah,
general, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, and the community in general. So back in October, we did our first round of public engagement where we did some pop-up events at the transit centers. And then we also spoke with the drivers of the vehicles themselves. Right now, this week, we are heading into the second phase of public involvement. So we're going to be doing those pop-ups at the transit center, Sahono Tadai, Roy Laos, Rodstad Center, and then supplementing that with a pop-up event at the Green Valley Library to speak with those residents down there. And then we're including some focus groups along for this round of public engagement. So Aho community, we met with the Pima County Department of Transportation, City of Tucson this morning. Then we're going to be meeting with the Vail Chamber. So getting a whole bunch of well-rounded approaches in all those jurisdictions, Oro Valley, Marana, Picture Rocks, Vail again. And then talking with the senior citizens and senior center representatives, the interfaith community services, kind of the social services take on that as well. So we really want to get a well-rounded approach of the community, not just the riders on this round of engagement. And then of course, meeting with the technical committee right now, and then PAG's Transportation Planning Commission too. So we do have an online survey set up, which we will get those links out to you. And then we will be in person at those. We have boards that we will be presenting so we can get people right there and then, and hopefully get a lot of good, meaningful engagement and interaction through these focus groups and the pop-up events throughout the week here.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions with the public engagement? All right, so let's dive into the service opportunity zones, and Brian is going to begin, and then Gal and Luba will kind of finish it up.
Yeah, so based on the feedback we received previously at the tech meeting and from all the feedback, we've gone and made some updates to how we're approaching the simulations, the ridership estimates, and then we also have some pretty exciting simulation results to show y'all. So the first couple of slides, I just wanted to give like a high-level overview / reminder of like how this works. This slide is just showing all those different factors that go into the planning of microtransit and all the different things that we got to consider in order to plan a successful service. Next slide. And so as part of our simulation process, we drew up some zones on a map that we think are good opportunity areas for microtransit to look into further. And as a starting point for running our simulations and doing all of these modeling, we divided the zones into two categories are weekday service and our extended service based on transit propensity, the analysis that we did during the existing conditions phase. And if you go to the next slide, there is a map of all the zones that we have been analyzing. The orange zones are our weekday service. So these are places that are only going to have microtransit service provided on weekdays. And then our expanded service, which are zones that have service on weekends as well. And then they also have a longer service span during the day. And so just want to emphasize that these two categories is just a starting point for our simulation process. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is the final recommendation in terms of like service quality that we're providing, but it is an input into the simulation process that we're going to talk about later. Next slide. And so just some of the parameters that go into the planning/simulation process that we're going through, and also a reminder of how these zones work. So the travel rules is that people can travel anywhere to anywhere within the zone, and also there are some certain points of interest outside the zones that people may go to, and we've identified those points of interest based on the travel demand analysis we did in the existing conditions phase. In terms of the booking model, it's purely on demand, so people order through an app, and then a ride will come pick them up. The weekday zones have a slightly longer average wait time compared to the extended zone as part of our design parameters. The vehicles drop off and pick up passengers curb to curb, so closest to their final destination. And then the fleet, we are assuming minivans, some of which are wheelchair accessible to serve those trips. And then the service hours, as I mentioned before, the weekday ones are only on weekdays, and the extended ones are also on Saturdays and Sundays. And the extended ones also have a slightly longer service span. And so these are the inputs that go into our simulation process, and then we'll start talking about some of the results and some of what we're seeing after our process. If you go to the next slide. And based on those results that we're seeing from the simulation, we've also gone back to the phasing of the zones where we think makes the most sense for microtransit to start, like kind of the order of where we think microtransit could be implemented. And now I will hand it to Via to talk about the results.
Thanks, Brian. So maybe we can stay on this slide for a second and talk about the ridership estimates and then get into the simulation results. So as Brian showed, one of the key inputs into the modeling is demand or estimated ridership for each of these services. That with the quality of service helps us measure what the expected outputs and what the service will look like. So we really start with these ridership estimates to build a baseline of what the modeling will look like. And the ridership estimates are based off of a lot of different factors. That includes the zone size, the population and jobs in the zones, the travel destinations outside of the zone, and the usefulness of the zone in terms of like key destinations and where people can go. And it's also based off of some demographic factors. So an area with a lot of zero vehicle households and like low income residents is likely to have higher ridership than an area that is, higher income with a lot of two vehicle households where public transit is just less likely to be used. So that's kind of what is inputted into these ridership estimates. And we always provide a low, medium, and high estimate for our modeling. And that really is because there's a lot of different factors that are involved in estimating demand. And we want to be able to give you a range of what to expect. So the medium is kind of our best estimate if these services perform similar to other peer services with the same kind of characteristics. And that is after about 6 to 12 months. So like after the service matures, not at the start. On the low end, this is, if the service performs like slightly lower than expected. We also noted that if the service is not fare free as it currently is, that would also impact ridership. So if you were to have a fared service, even if those fares are, $1 to $2, you would likely see closer to those lower demand estimates. And then on the high end, this is if the service grows faster than expected. Let's say, it goes viral on a marketing campaign or lots of investment is done into marketing. You might see it reach those higher numbers sooner than later. So we have done the modeling for all 3 scenarios for you. We'll be showing you a bit about the medium and then a range from low to high. But we have all those results if anyone wants to dig into them further. So I'm going to the next slide. So for each of the zones, like I mentioned, we have a range of results from the low to the medium shown here. I will go through kind of like what is being shown on the slide, and then we have a slide for each and then a comparison at the end, which I think will be helpful for people to actually take a step back and look at all these numbers, because I know can be overwhelming to see tons of numbers back to back for how many zones we've got. So starting at the top here, for the first zone, we have the fleet size at peak. So this is 2 to 4 vehicles at peak. What that means is that during the highest ridership times of the day, you would need 2 to 4 vehicles to serve the estimated demand that we just showed on the previous slide. You might not need that full fleet size throughout the day during lower ridership hours, or if a vehicle goes on break, you might not need those vehicles throughout the whole day. That's especially true on those extended service hours and weekend hours as well. Next, we have the weekday ridership that was shown on the previous slide. And then we have our first measure of efficiency, which we're calling microtransit productivity, measured as the boardings per revenue hour. So this is, one way you can look at how efficient your service is, how many rides you're able to serve with each vehicle hour that vehicle is on the road. So here we're basically saying that for every vehicle hour, you can serve between 0.7 and 2.1 trips based off of, all the different inputs that we've put into that. So part of that is, where we expect the travel to be. We see that here there's some key travel generators that are outside of the zone, creating long trips. So that also impacts your ability to be efficient with the service. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move on. The next 2 rows here are talking about the quality of service or the rider experience. So here we've got the first one is wait time. That's from the time that someone requests a ride to when that vehicle comes to pick them up. Here we're saying that's between 17 to 21 minutes on average throughout the peak period. And then the next row is the ride duration. So how many minutes from the time that rider gets into the vehicle to the time they are dropped off, including any detours to pick up or drop off passengers on the way. So here, these are like quite long trips between 28 and 34 minutes on average. And again, that's partly due to those travel generators that are out of the zone. And then we've got some annualized numbers here. Some people prefer to see the annual versus the weekday. Can be helpful for planning purposes. So the annual ridership estimates for those extended services, that includes the weekend hours. The annual vehicle hours. So that is a good way to measure the cost of the service. So we're looking at, we estimated an $80 hourly cost based off of PAG's recent demand response costs. But again, this can be adjusted. And then that multiplies out to those estimated annual costs. So for the service with the 2 to 4 vehicles, you're looking at $0.3 to $0.7 million per year. And then the last row is an estimated cost per ride. So kind of another measure of efficiency, or how efficient you're using your dollars for the service. So how you can see kind of like the more efficient services will have a lower cost per ride than some of the less efficient services, because you're not using those vehicle hours as productively. So here you're looking at a $44 to $77 range per ride. Let's keep going, and then I maybe will pause on the summary slide for questions unless anything it's urgent. I don't see any hands up. Okay. So going through these zones, each of them will have, different results based off a variety of different factors. So here, Picture Rocks, this is one of the lower estimated ridership zones, so like even less than 10 rides per weekday. Here, we would expect you to only need about 2 vehicles for the service, and you might not even need that second vehicle all day. We would recommend that for any independent service, you would be operating with at least 2 vehicles. The purpose for that is that you just, maintain reliability of your service, especially with these like larger zones and these far away travel destinations. Like if someone requests a ride all the way at one end and then 5 minutes later, all the way on the other end, you wouldn't be able to serve both of those trips with only one vehicle. If something happens to one of the vehicles, if your driver takes a break, which is obviously going to happen, that way you don't have to have a break in your service. So at a minimum, we would recommend you have 2 vehicles in each of these services. If you were to implement 2 zones that are very close to each other, that, you know, maybe are slightly low ridership, you could potentially share that second vehicle, but that would really depend on where those zones are and how close they are to each other. So because of the low ridership here and the large kind of zone or travel generator locations, this is one of the lower productivity services with only 0.2 to 1.3 boardings per revenue hour, average wait times between 10 and 22 minutes, and then kind of longer trip durations because of, again, those travel generators. So while this is a lower overall cost estimated service, the cost per ride is quite high because of the lower efficiency. Yes, I see a hand up.
So, Val, did you all talk or think about connecting the Picture Rocks area, and this goes for all of the areas, into Oro Valley or Marana or even the SunTrans system, so that I realize Picture Rocks has spent a lot of years saying they need some help getting into the getting into other areas of town. So connecting them to, say, the SunTrans bus system or into the Oro Valley dial-a-ride system.
Yeah, that's a great question. And maybe Brian Marietti can jump in after me, but I believe a few of these key travel generators that are outside of the zone also are where fixed routes are available. So you could, you know, take that to a fixed route and then connect into the greater region.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because I think a lot of these can be used also as kind of like a first last mile to the broader network, which is a very common use for microtransit. Okay, next zone. So now we're getting into some of those extended services. So you'll see kind of the ridership numbers are higher, more partly because we just expect these zones to have higher transit propensity, but also because you're looking at weekend and longer hours as well. So here we're looking at one of the like more compact zones with the travel generators being closer. So you'll see, 3 to 6 vehicles, but the productivity is higher and the wait times and the trip durations are lower, and your cost per ride is also lower. We can go to the next one. Oro Valley similarly, is a higher kind of productivity with those like slightly lower trip durations and wait times, but this is one of the more higher ridership areas. And so here we would expect you to need closer to 5 to 10 vehicles. So while the cost per ride and the efficiency is on the lower end, the overall cost for this one is a bit higher, up to 2.4 million on that high demand side. Go on to number 5. Catalina Foothills. Oh, Casadoves, yes, thank you. Okay, so here, this is kind of one that's a bit middle of the road again. So on that lower end for the ride durations and the wait times, kind of on the higher end for the ridership. So it's more of a more efficient service than some of the other ones with a lower cost per ride, looking at 3 to 6 vehicles at peak times and closer to that $1 million mark. So cheaper than some of the larger zones. You can see like this even just by the zone boundary, the size of the zone boundary on the bottom right there is like 14.4 miles squared. And you'll see some of the other ones are, over 50. So that really does impact the ride durations and the wait times. Go on to the next one. So Catalina Foothills, so this is another one of the weekday services. So while this is quite a large service with the 43 square miles and has a relatively high ridership, it is fairly productive for one of the weekday services. And part of that is because those travel generators are close by, and we'd expect you to be able to aggregate a lot of ridership here. And again, kind of looking at that lower cost per ride, but needing 2 to 5 vehicles. So the overall cost between, $500,000 and $1 million. Tenque Verde is one of the smaller zones, or smaller in ridership and slightly less efficient, even though you have those kind of lower trip durations and wait times. Part of that is just because you know, with these zones, you still will need 2 to 3 vehicles to operate the service. So you aren't able to as efficiently share rides and aggregate rides than if this similar size zone would have a higher expected ridership. And again, we kind of looked at a lot of different factors for estimating the ridership, but you know, the population density, the jobs in the zone, all kind of impact what we estimate for the ridership here. Rita Ranch, Savano. So this is, again, one of the smaller zones, more compact. You get a higher productivity, higher efficiency, higher ability to aggregate your vehicles with the 2 to 3 vehicles, even though, again, this one is like slightly on the lower ridership side. And you're looking at, you know, about 500,000 or less here with only the 2 to 3 vehicles. I'm sorry, I know this is a lot of numbers, but I will pause shortly. So Vail, again, this is one of the smaller zones, more compact. This one did have a quite low estimated ridership. So the productivity here is quite low. And then again, the cost per ride ends up being higher, even though the overall cost for the service is on the lower end. So Tucson Estates / Drexel Heights / Valencia West. So this zone is one of the larger zones with some of the highest ridership. It's kind of middle of the road there in productivity. Some of those rides are quite long. Again, you're looking at a zone that's over 50 square miles here. Even though the travel generators are close to the zone, we still expect some of the trips within that zone to be quite long. And that's impacting the productivity here and the overall like need for additional vehicles. So this is one of the more expensive zones, but the cost per ride and the efficiency are kind of like middle of the road. West Tucson, again, this is kind of going back to some of the slightly more compact zones. This one, again, was on the higher ridership zone, one of the more productive services, and you'll see the cost per ride is like almost on the low end, as low as $20. So this is one of the more efficient services. Part of that is because the zone is on the kind of smaller end, but there also aren't any travel destinations outside of the zone. So the trips are able to stay kind of shorter. Sahuarita Valley, Sahuarita Green Valley. This one is kind of middle in terms of ridership and in terms of vehicles and overall cost, but it is one of the more efficient services. It's not necessarily like one of the smallest ones, but just the way that the zone is shaped. You kind of aren't able to detour too far off of your path because of the shape of the zone. So you're able to aggregate your ridership pretty effectively here. Kind of the more compact and small the zones are and where the travel generators are will really kind of impact the ability to aggregate rides. So here, while the trip durations are a little bit higher, we do expect you to be able to be quite efficient with the service and have a low cost per ride. And then the last one, Ajo. So we know this is quite successful now. It is on the larger side of the zones that we were looking at. And so even though we would expect like some growth here with the on-demand, so even though you don't have a ton of ridership here, we would expect you to need 2 to 3 vehicles to operate the service, just to make sure again that you have like reliability across such a large zone. Yeah, Davida.
So I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you again, but going back to the Rita Ranch, Savano, and the Vail area, I can see cross-pollination between those 2 zones. Do they connect, or did you consider making them one zone to go back and forth because you have that cross-pollination?
The Rita Ranch and Savano? Maybe we can just go
with Vail.
Oh, with Vail.
You have a connection point where those 2 zones touch each other. I expect that you'll have some cross-pollination between those 2 zones.
Yeah, let me double check because I don't know off the top of my head. I think they are kind of right next to each other. So I think people could technically travel from, they wouldn't necessarily be able to travel from one zone to the other, but they could kind of, get off on the border and then get onto another vehicle.
Right.
I think at some point you could look at combining them. What we would just in general recommend is like starting off smaller. In general, like I kind of mentioned with some of the like faraway travel generators, the longer the trips you allow, the less efficient your service is likely to be.
Right.
That needs to be balanced with, the utility of the service. And if, a lot of people are trying to get from one place to another, that could be an argument for, allowing those larger travel destinations. You could also put like one key destination or travel generator in the opposite zone. So you can't travel anywhere within that zone, but like you can travel to travel generators outside of the zones. You could do that in an opposite zone as well.
Based on the Sun on Demand, we are seeing zone 1 and zone 2 cross-pollinating each other. And in where you have the Rita Ranch, Savano, and the Vale both coming together at the Houghton Town Center, I see cross-pollination. Okay, that one's work related, one's personal, I live in that area related. And I'm gonna tell you, you've got people in the area that shows Vale that are want to get Rita Ranch and vice versa because of the businesses that are available. And then you have the Rita Ranch and Savano connecting to Pima College. So you will have some of that cross-pollination, I expect.
Yeah, that's
No
helpful
guarantee.
context. Yeah, I don't know if Brian, you have more to add because you were more involved in the generating zones than I was.
Yeah, we definitely saw that pattern when we were doing the analysis on the travel demand. And so for Vail, we added the retail and the employment opportunities in the Rita Ranch as like those outside destinations that people in Vail could still travel to. We did not at this phase add like the Pima Community College West campus to Vail, but that's something we could look into as adding as a potential other like destination for those residents.
Yeah, it's East Campus, by the way, but that's okay.
East Campus, yeah.
Just so that they have, if you're going to Walmart, then you could get on the other zone and go farther. I don't know that you need to. That's why I was asking about making them the same, or, but you have vehicles that could go back and forth between the two zones. That's one where I see you could do that. So then you're using the vehicles more productively if you have that opportunity.
And I think for the Vail service area, I know we at least talked about it, but adding the park and ride location on Old Vail Road, right in that Rita Ranch area for people in Vail to connect to that park and ride to then use the express to get to and from downtown. So I know that's, I don't know if that was included in this or not, but that could also be a possibility.
Because we didn't have time to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, all these zones have a connection point to the fixed route network as well.
Thank you.
We have maybe one more slide. So here kind of just showing you a summary of the results across some of those key metrics. We're not making any kind of like recommendations at this point, and I think we've highlighted some of the highest performing and lowest performing across these metrics, but I think you all can decide, what metric is most important to you, and then, decide based off of your values in terms of importance. So maybe productivity or how efficient you are using your dollars is not as important as having a service that serves more riders, or that is service that is lower cost overall to the community. And so we did want to just kind of provide some opportunity for you to be able to kind of compare across the zones as you choose, what to implement first. But wanted to flag kind of the lowest performing and the highest performing across some of these metrics, not necessarily saying that, these ones are good or these ones are bad, because that, really depends on how you're defining good and bad, which you can do across a variety of different metrics. I see another hand.
And that is super important because, one of the kind of guidance that we receive is to, in places where there is already service and is going to be either transformed to microtransit, or where fixed routes are going to be replaced with microtransit, to try to stay cost neutral. So in the next stage, we are going to be looking at how that can happen, if that really can happen at all. Yeah. Lisa and Jonathan.
Hi. Yes, this is Lisa. I just had a question, like on the picture rocks one, I don't know if you can go back to the picture rocks slide. I know it's one of the lower producing, but has there been any thought about utilizing any of the like the Continental Ranch area as part of it? I mean, you're going right through it to get particularly north of Twin Peaks, where the Sunflower is, which is the age restricted community. Because you literally drive right past it to get to the outlet mall destination. So I don't know if any of that area, if you've thought about adding that in just to improve ridership in the area, and then they, like I said, it's an age restricted area to the north that might be utilizing it more.
What is the area again?
So the whole right there where you have your two dots, you have Tucson Outlet and then you have Arizona Pavilions. Everything on the west side of the freeway right there is Continental Ranch, which is a large housing area. We used to have Sun Shuttle there many years ago. We had Sun Shuttle that went through there. It just didn't have a lot of ridership. However, on the north, the Twin Peaks is the road that kind of connects that this Picture Rocks is going to take Twin Peaks to the outlet mall is the route it'll take to get over there. So the Twin Peaks area between Silver Bell and Coach Line on the north side of that road is called Sunflower, and it's an age restricted community. And I know we've had some interest off and on. People would want to utilize it. I'm not saying they have done a huge amount in the past, but I know that there is some interest in that area. So I just didn't know if adding a small portion of Continental Ranch in there might help this pencil a little bit more.
We can look into it, yes. See if it makes sense, and also, yeah, because it could be. I mean, we need to see if Marana, extending Marana would make more sense, or if it is extending the Picture Rocks. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks. So Gal, I'm really curious about the modeling and how good this model is. Have you had a chance to use this model in other projects and then do some pre and post evaluation to see if you guys are even hitting the mark or getting close?
Luba, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So our model is based on our actual algorithm that we use to run our microtransit deployments. So it isn't just a model, it's an algorithm that is being deployed. We do see some differences between how the model runs in isolation versus performance on the ground. And we tend to adjust outcomes based on that information and basically set the model parameters in a way that compensates for that. So yes, this has been tested across hundreds of VIA services and hundreds of consulting studies. And we are fairly confident in the outputs, with the caveat that here we're looking at a time frame of somewhere of like 6 to 12 months after a zone is implemented. There's a lot that can vary depending on marketing and the fees that riders might have to pay, et cetera. And so there's obviously things that can influence how something performs, but given if this is implemented in the same manner as expected, we're very confident that this is what these zones will look like about a year out.
Great, thank you.
I think you have one more slide, Gal.
Thank you. I think just a couple key takeaways. I think I've talked a bit through these, but just to kind of like highlight some of the main things that we're seeing. So across all of these zones, we're really finding that the efficiency is largely influenced by the potential ridership demand that we've estimated in the zones, as well as the estimated trip durations, which are a function of, both the trip size, the zone size and the travel generator. So larger zones and travel generators that are further away from the zone will lead to longer trips and thus have a less efficient service. In general, we would also recommend, as I mentioned, always operating with a minimum of 2 vehicles per zone. That really just helps you keep service reliability, which also impacts demand, right? Like if you have a service that's reliable where people can request a ride and they know they'll get a ride, they're more likely to use the service. After a few times of requesting a ride and not getting a proposal, you might be less likely to use the service, less likely to recommend it to a friend, and then your ridership goes down. We also wanted to flag that in some of the zones with 2 vehicles and kind of productivities or efficiencies of less than 2 boardings per revenue hour, you could also look at a pre-scheduled service like you have in some of the areas. Now, pre-scheduling will just maximize that the use of the vehicles throughout the day by knowing fully the origin and destination patterns before deploying the vehicle. So the vehicle knows the routing ahead of time, and you're able to use your vehicle hours more efficiently. Picture Rocks would potentially be a good example for that. It does kind of like impact the quality of service, right? Like if someone doesn't have to plan ahead, it's oftentimes a better quality for them. But we are, with some of those zones with lower ridership, seeing quite expensive costs per trip, and especially where you might not need that second vehicle throughout the day, it'd be good for the operator to kind of know that you only need the second vehicle maybe for a 4-hour shift in the middle of the day, not necessarily throughout the entire period. So that can kind of help keep costs down as well. There are other, models as well that you could look into, but did want to flag that pre-scheduling is an option as well for some of those lower efficiency zones and lower ridership areas.
Thank you. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the next steps. So thank you so much for your comments, because now we can go back to the drawing board and include your recommendations and see, refine the simulations and adjust all the timeframes. And then we will proceed to develop kind of the preferred scenario for each one of the zones. We are also at the same time that we are doing this, because we already know more or less how these zones, and many of them are already kind of defined, and it seems that many of them you guys are okay with the boundaries. We are going to be performing the Title VI analysis concurrently, and also begin doing all the analysis for the air quality benefits and VMT reductions, vehicle miles, travel reductions, and finalizing the recommendations. So we'll talk to Hannah and Jeanette to determine if we will be meeting again in April. That was something that we had discussed, but based on how this moves, it may be kind of end of April or beginning of May. I think we will communicate with you again with the goal of having this ready by the end of May. So it's a lot going on, but it's moving steadily. Yeah. And I don't know if there are any questions. That's kind of the end of our presentation.
Any other questions, comments from anyone? Feel free to unmute or, just unmute and speak or raise your hand. Another second here.
Yeah, we already got very good comments. So.
Excuse me. All right, well, seeing none, I think we can move on then to the last item, which is just our adjournment. So thank you so much again, everyone, for attending, for the great comments, the feedback. Really appreciate your time. So the PowerPoint or this presentation will be loaded online. The meeting was also recorded, so I'll send links to both of those. So if you think of anything, have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to meet offline as needed as well. So thank you so much again, everyone. Go ahead and adjourn the meeting and hope you have a great rest of your day.